Welcome, everyone. We are now starting our session on fatherhood, mindfulness, and mental health. And this is part of the third Amplifying Her Voice Summit. I am hosting the summit from Bermuda. We are in the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation office today. So delighted to be here and looking forward to a very insightful conversation. We've got experts, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got podcasters, and most importantly, very different perspectives on this topic of mental health when it comes to fatherhood. And so I would like each of the panelists to give me a quick introduction, 2-minute introduction, please, about your interest in this topic and why you're so passionate about it. I'm going to start with Cameron, and then we'll go to Helena, Brian, and then Brad. Cameron?
Great. Thanks, Anu. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly. You can see you as well.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really honored to be here. My name is Cameron Stout. I'm an attorney and a mediator, and I'm also have a lived experience with both depression and alcoholism. I'm an alcoholic. I'm 9 years sober, and I went through two major depressions in my life, the first in 91 and the second much more recently in 2013. It was a very, very deep depression. I was suicidal. I had to go into a psychiatric ward, and through a number of different therapies, medications, self-care, CBT, that is cognitive behavioral therapy. I came out the other side feeling better in a lot of ways than I ever have. I continue to practice law, but not all that much. Most of my time is taken up giving talks on mental health, substance abuse, and self-care. I speak with students, lawyers, fellow lawyers, and others, and I share my story of hope and healing, and I talk quite a bit about self-care strategies, particularly exercise, meditation, etc. And looking forward to the panel today. Thanks so much, Anu.
Absolutely. Great to have you. Helena, we had such a great conversation yesterday. I'm so glad we connected.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, great to meet you all. My name is Helena Lucia, and I am a software engineer. I work for a cybersecurity company, as well as through the middle of 2020, I started to recognize that the next wave of the pandemic was going to be a mental health crisis and alcohol use and addiction crisis. And so I started preparing. I started taking some coaching trainings, learned multiple modalities, started to learn about nervous system and trauma and neuroscience and all of the intricacies of what's going on with the world at large right now. And so I started a coaching practice and a podcast. So my podcast is called Sisu Journey. Sisu is a Finnish word that means resilience in the face of extreme adversity. And the tagline is science and stories of resilience. And so on the podcast, the idea was to bring together this kind of curse of separatedness that we have in our culture by using storytelling to share stories of resilience so that folks can listen to stories and be inspired and gain tools and learn about science-based modalities that can support them in their journey. I also support folks to get to know their nervous system and to get rid of the trauma and the shock that they've had in this last year and a half plus of going through this aggregate trauma that we have. I'm not a father, obviously, but I am a mother, and I do co-parent children with my partner as well as my ex-husband, and so I do have a little bit of context in how this applies to the parenting journey. So that's why I'm here, and I'm excited to learn and share with all of you.
Absolutely. Brian?
Well, Anu, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to this panel. I didn't think really too much about the relevancy until I sat back and I thought about my own journey, how I got to kind of where I have this opportunity for self-realization. And, you know, working inside the bubbles that we all kind of do creates, a different kind of stress. And that stress is sometimes not fully articulated. And it's really important for all of us to be able to kind of manage our lives better against our own personal backdrop. So, when I was studying for my psych degree about 30 years ago or so, I never thought I would be able to kind of put it to use, right? I tried to find practical applications for it. And then I realized that if I started to think about myself and how I can go out and help other people, I was helping myself in that process. So I'm really excited to be here. I run a pretty active technology advisory in New York. I'm also the founder of Plato, which is a data platform that after 3 years, we're finally seeing the light of commercialization right now, which in itself has been a feat due to all the, the gyrations of not only, this startup ecosystem and this startup ethos, but it's, trying to keep your integrity intact through this entire process is very difficult because of the distractions that are around all of us. So I'm here to share some insights. Very nice to meet all of you, and, great to be here.
Great to have you, Brian. I'm so glad you made it. Brad, so great to connect with you. Are you a new father? Is that a picture of your new baby?
Oh, well, that's Kooky, Savannah. She's 4 now.
Okay.
But that's kind of one of my favorite pictures of her. So,
Excellent.
But yeah, no, I'm a retired military officer and a JAG. I'm an attorney and an engineer. And when I was in Afghanistan, I caught PTSD, and that aggravated a lot of latent mental illnesses that I had. And I found out when I retired that I am a bipolar autistic psychopath, and I have ADHD and PTSD. And so in some ways, I guess I sort of think of myself, I'm a nonlinear, asymmetric thinker, and I have been my whole life. And I did a podcast episode. I started podcasting to sort of journal, just, my journey and thought processes. And so in some ways, it's kind of turned into, in some ways, an ambassadorship of neurodiversity, where you can't really help what you are, but you can control who you become. And
Great.
So that's just kind of been my angle. And I turned in a podcast episode that said, hey, this is the kind of dad I am. And they invited me to come along. My podcast is Sonic Gravity.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So Helena, I want to take it back to you. We were talking about, COVID and you starting your podcast around mental health. Tell us a little bit about your journey over the past few months and what you've been focusing on and why, please.
Yeah. So my journey is to find people who are from diverse backgrounds. So I like variety in all kinds of life. So like Brad mentioned, neurodiversity is very important. I recently interviewed some people that have, bipolar disorder, other kind of, mental health issues or illnesses, as well as just kind of LGBTQIA plus, different people that have just different struggles and able to kind of reflect back and share when they were at crossroads and when they were dealing with trauma, the different things that they tried and the different things that healed them. The reason why I'm really highlighting the trauma path is just I feel strongly that what we've been through in the last year and a half is a highly traumatic event, especially when you look at how the nervous system responds to things that are unexpected, where we don't have context, choice, and connection, and the signals of unsafety that happen, and especially for people who have not, like many of us, several have already mentioned that we've been accustomed to trauma in our lives, right? So that's a positive and a negative. But the positive is that it can make you stronger and more resilient and have all these resources and tools to grab onto. But unfortunately, there are millions and millions of people who are going through this almost for the first time. and they don't have these same tools. And so getting the word out, getting the message of what is available and accessible to us, that there's no shame, that we're regulating our nervous system with the two socially acceptable drugs we have, which are alcohol and caffeine, which are both terrible for the nervous system. And if people are stuck in kind of that perpetual cycle between those two things, it's because their mind is working the way it's supposed to, and they're using those tools to regulate their nervous system because they've been told to. And there's no shame in that, but there is support to kind of be pulled out of that and to be held around that. And I'm trying to just kind of evangelize that message the best I can.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your work, and thank you so much for sharing your journey. Cameron, your thoughts, like, how you're a professional speaker, author, over the past 18 months, given what Helena's been sharing, just in terms of the way we've all been adapting, the way that we've all been coping with the situation, what changes have you noticed in the way that you approach this topic of mental health and fatherhood and mindfulness?
Well, I forgot to mention right up front that I am a father. And
great. Happy Father's Day, by the way, to all the dads that are on this
all you guys.
As well.
I have 2 adult children. They're rock stars. Very, very proud of them. In terms of what I've been doing, as I mentioned, I do give talks on mental health and substance abuse. The talks that I was giving were in person, and COVID derailed that. Obviously, it derailed lots and lots of trains. And so I started doing webinars, and I've expanded what I do to help people one-on-one. I'm not a certified coach yet, but I do a lot of one-on-one mentoring, and I speak with a lot of students. And so recently I've been offering guidance on how to re-enter into the workplace in person. And what does that look like? Everyone's scared to death of it. I'm back in my workplace because I work from home, but I've worked in a law firm for 20 plus years before this. And so I'm helping people get over what I think are the usual problems that have been exacerbated by the fear of getting back into the workplace. Imposter syndrome, I talk a lot about that. Fear of failure. How do we get out of the isolation or the silos that we've been in with COVID and into a physical office where we're speaking one-on-one, face-to-face with people? And one of my big techniques is to put together what I call a SEAL team. That, for me, is an acronym for a supportive, energizing, and loving team, a group that you have both at work and outside work that you can lean into, that provides you the kind of support that you need both in the workplace and otherwise. So I'm also giving folks guides on speaking tips and writing to help people get back into one-on-one interaction. So those are some of the changes that I've made. In terms of fatherhood, I am speaking more and more with parents and emphasizing for them how important it is to leave judgment at the door, to listen to their own kids, to listen to other kids without offering immediate solutions, because we all want to control things so much. And so being an empathetic listener rather than a counselor right off the bat. So those are just some of the things anew that I've been focused on in the last year or so. So thank you.
I would think you'd be on overdrive at this point, given your work and your interests and just the need that, I can't imagine, like, all the empaths out there, like you are kicking it in high gear.
Well, one thing I should mention is that I do attend a 12-step program every day and find there's so much support in that I'm starting what I call SEAL team meetings, which are like an AA meeting, except they're not focused necessarily on addiction. It's not a 12-step. It's basically a community where you can come in, anyone's welcome, and share uninterrupted for a couple of minutes. And I'm finding we're just starting with that, and I'm finding that is bringing comfort to folks who need that sort of a SEAL team or community. Sorry to interrupt there.
No, that's good. It's good you interjected. And maybe we'll dive into what that technique is in just a minute, just a few minutes. So, Brian, you've been coping as an entrepreneur. This has been like one of the crazy. You and I have the same schedule basically. we never sleep. We're always like in sync with one another. There's a lot of people, like especially women, who have been forced out of the workforce, and the whole family structure has shifted. Men have had to bear, more responsibility on the home front as well, keeping it all together. What techniques and hacks have you, can you share with us? Like, you're a dad, you've got a booming practice right now, on high gear. How are you coping?
Well, it's taken about 25 years of doing this to kind of figure out how to neutralize your own emotions and your own expectations to kind of deal with the complexities of what we're doing. If I didn't have the support structure at home between my wife and my kids that really, still to this day, don't have an understanding really exactly what I do. It's very complex. It's the internal support structure that we're also fortunate to have. In turn, I try to push that back out. We have 12 families that we support at the end of the day. And, to us, that is a big responsibility, especially as we approach sustainability in our own business. So, I think there has to be a mutual understanding of where your partner is throughout this entire process, that it's not just a one-way street. It's really a lot of give and take and to be there for the other person. My wife happened to be, laid off in May of last year.
She watching this? Is she watching this right now?
I have no idea, but if you're there, honey, hi. No.
I know she registered, so she's probably watching from a different computer. Let's see.
Either way, I again, the complexity of what has happened in the last 18 months in all our lives, right? It was really the lead up to kind of where COVID went, that there was an evolution that was happening, especially regarding workplace dynamics. We started to, platforms like Zoom that were very, very well, situated prior to this thing, went off to a completely different level because we had to figure out we couldn't just sit in the isolation of our dwellings and be completely detached from people. Therefore, this whole other, I would say, subculture of remote work has its own complexities to itself that we need to all find kind of a balance. I've been in my little bunker for about 18 months. I get here early in the morning and I leave at a relatively respectable hour, and I do sleep at night because I put myself into that I know if I want to be energetic tomorrow, I have to take care of myself and I have to be well rested to kind of deal with the stress. And, you manage the stress at the end of the day. I encourage everybody out there to do, physical activity over the course of the day. If you're sitting at a desk for hours, you can get locked in to a mode where you're not moving around, and your body and your mind need to move around, especially when we're faced with the complexities of, our own challenges. So, I think it's about support, Anu. I think it's always about patience. And trying to understand the other person on a very, very local level and a very personal level, because there's no one size fit all for anything.
Absolutely. And that's super great advice for the husbands out there. And I had this shocking statistic that I heard from our very first Amplifying Her Voice Summit, Brian. It was a woman from Nigeria. And she told me that 1/4 of all of the women during COVID had experienced some kind of domestic violence. Many were beaten, many were raped. It was because they were, in bad situation, but it just got worse. And the beds in these half like shelters, like these medical hospitals, the doctors were keeping data because this is the silent pandemic, as they call it in their country, because what's really killing people is the violence on top of the COVID, which was like something that we need to be thinking about. So advice to fathers, advice to men on how to to take care of their own mental health so they don't abuse their loved ones is just like super critical, super crucial. We take it for granted. I live by myself, so I'm okay. But it's just.
I think it's also, it's a cross-cultural issue. People reacted quite differently to this, but they had to adjust. If you had a good adjustment skills, you can move very, very quickly and adapt and not disrupt your business or your ability to earn money during a very tough period. But I think the reality now is that we're coming out of this, and we're kind of faced with our own responsibilities on how to be able to kind of be better for it at the end. That you'll look back on this time period and hopefully it built some character in some people, because I don't think the workplace of yesterday is coming back. It's a completely different dynamic right now, and companies have not only adjusted to it, it's going to have repercussions throughout the economy, I believe. So there is, complexity there, but we have to be productive as much as we can, I guess, over the time period that we're focused on our work.
Absolutely. So on that note, Brad, you're a dad, you've got a small child, you have multiple mental illnesses, self-professed mental illnesses. How do you keep your child safe? What advice could you give to fathers about their little ones, like when you're having to deal with your own issues?
Sure. Well, I actually have 4 kids, and I have 5 in the house because my sister-in-law experienced some domestic violence, just like you talked about, and so we pulled her out of that situation. So she's staying with us too. Now, my podcast is, and it's like I have asymmetric. I think totally asymmetrically, like nobody thinks like I do. And so my whole thing is sharing these kinds of things. And when it comes to kids and taking care of them, like you asked, I have this philosophy that's really kind of the human condition. And I call it the physics of leadership. And there's 3 things. It's one, everybody wants to do the best for themselves that they can. And the second thing is that your leadership, your influence is going to transact specifically and uniquely in the mind of whoever it is you're trying to lead or talk to, whether it's your child or your supervisor or what have you. And the third thing is that your impact is going to be determined by the way you make people feel about themselves. And that just across the board is the human condition. And when you think about the little girl, like your little girl wants to know and her daddy is listening. That's in my experience. And a little boy or a son wants to know that his father is proud of him. And so when you think about creating safe space for your children, all you really have to do is remember that that's what their interest is, and just make sure that whatever you're doing, you're communicating a constructive message to that interest. So that means when your daughter is talking to you, you stop what you're doing and you listen and you engage. And whatever your sons, and I mean, that's not to say that daughters don't need to know that their father's proud of them. Of course they do. But just I find that that's kind of the primary issue. And so like my sons have autism like I do. And in the pandemic, they've been getting straight A's because and it's funny that, Cameron talked about imposter syndrome, and it's really a lot of it that's a big deal. And I talk about that too. Of course, imposter syndrome is anxiety. And there's anxiety that's either self-inflicted or not self-inflicted. Not self-inflicted, you need a doc for. But the self-inflicted stuff, I find primarily comes from worrying about things you can't control and not living your values. So my values sort of as a podcaster is I want to leave my audience better than I found them. And so if I do that, even if it's just a little, I'm going to feel like a successful podcaster because that's something that I can control. If my value is getting a bunch of listeners and having everybody think I'm great, then I'm going to need I give my power away to somebody else to make me feel good about myself. And so that can be a goal, but you don't want it to be your value. And the big thing about raising kids in an environment where they feel safe is encouraging values in them that they can control. So my son, who's autistic just like me, started having trouble and getting bad grades and had anxiety. It was because he was worried about what the letter on his report card was going to be. And what I told him was, I don't care what that letter is. What I want to see is that you prepared, that you did what you could, because if he's distracted, you only have a certain amount of energy. And if you're worried about something you can't control, like what grade you got, then you're going to be distracted when you're trying to prepare. But I told him that if he was prepared, even if he failed, we would just, re-engage and learn the material. But as long as he was prepared, his father would always be proud of him. So creating safe space is about finding those values in your kids, in my opinion, that they can control, and always engaging in a way that's constructive. 'Cause I'm not an empathetic person. That's why I have to create sort of these paradigms and structures, kind of like a checklist, so I make sure that I send my kids off in the right direction. Because I think a father sends their kids in a direction. There's no question. The only decision a father needs to make is whether you're going to send them on a path to greatness or send them down the drain or somewhere in the middle.
Wow,
So
that's powerful.
set them up for greatness.
That's really good advice for the dads listening out there. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being mindful of your children's feelings and needs. Most importantly, Helena, you and I talked about this yesterday about what impact the pandemic has had on our children, and just the silent absorption of parents' emotions and feelings and traumas that are impacting our children. Can you build on what Brad was just sharing with us?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, Brad was talking about what kids need, and I guess I'll take it back a step and talk about what everybody needs. And I mentioned this earlier, that in order for our nervous system to feel safe, we need context, we need choice, and we need connection. And context was something that was severely lacking in the beginning of the pandemic, right? We didn't know any. We didn't know how it was being transmitted. We had so many misleading details, coming from the news, coming from the CDC, coming from the administration, and it was just very complicated. And of course, that can't be helped when nobody really has context, right? And so that filtered through to the kids. A lot of us, when we become dysregulated, which we all immediately did, then we stop sharing those things out, right? So the kids had even less context, and now they're not going to school, and what the heck is going on? And so in order to kind of support them out of it, first of all, we need to put our own oxygen mask on before we help our kids, right? So we need to make sure that we bring our nervous systems to safety in order to support them. But we also need to, within the reason that we need to make sure that we're giving our kids context. And because I'm the parent and I said so, it's not context. So, and then choice. I can't remember who the parenting teachers were when my kids were little, but they would recommend you tell your kid, would you like water or nothing? Instead of it's only water, to give kids a choice within the things that they can control, like Brad mentioned about giving control, is so important, to let them have the context and to let them have the choice. And then, of course, the connection piece is so important. And we can't enter into that until our nervous system is in safety. Brian mentioned productivity, but really, I think a big part of getting rid of this nervous system trauma is going to involve rest as well. Rest, reconnecting our energy, listening to our body. I don't know if you know this, but 80% of the messages of our nervous system are going from body to brain. Only 20% are going from brain to body. And so the idea that we should be able to override our nervous system with our conscious mind is ludicrous. And we need to start listening to what our body is saying, taking the time to rest with our kids, bringing back that context, that choice and connection, and really supporting them to remove the trauma of the pandemic out of their bodies. Because if we don't, we'll never the pandemic will be over, but it won't be over in here.
Yes, it's the internalization. Brian, do you want to react to this? Are your kids reacting to pandemic, or are they like dealing with it?
Well, not only, both my kids were in Israel for a period of the last couple of months during the tail end of there, and they had other complexities there that produced a couple stressful situations for all of us. So not only were we dealing with or me as a parent, worried about COVID, but also, bombs flying all over the place, which has another stress on a parent, right? And other things that, you hope that you've created the right, guidance for them, that they can make their own decisions at the end of the day, which in turn, as they are now young adults, you have to almost instill that responsibility upon them. So they've adjusted. I've watched the adjustment, but like everything, I think there's a readjustment back to society right now because a new norm has been established, and that norm is quite complex, and every person deals with it. But getting back to Helena, that the circuitry of our own body, right, is very much contingent upon flow. And, it's not just only about energy and the electronic circuitry that's going around. It's kind of, the balance of things. Stress is one of those things that kind of find their way into physical ailments that can be alleviated with a little bit of, I would say, repositioning, all the time, and being flexible and not being so one-way rigid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cameron, thoughts on this? You're on mute, love. You're on mute. It's okay. Come back to me. You got to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. I'm certainly no expert. I talked to Helena and Brian and Brad before we started, and I was very, very interested in this idea of circuitry and which way these things go. I'm no expert in that, but I think that the messages that I have correspond with that or dovetail with that, in the sense of, I think one of the main problems that parents unwittingly, I think, do with their kids is to set up the fear of failure with them so much by setting goals for them. And I call it the Success Express, where there's a tendency to say, I will be happy, or you, my kid, will be happy when. Then you fill in that blank. And the problem with that is you don't get a chance to enjoy the present, to, instead of thinking, I better make the Little League team or whatever it is, you say, I'm enjoying the process right now. I'm in the present of enjoying throwing the ball and getting better at that. And so I think that we need to be more present focused, and to model for our kids and share our own, I wouldn't call them weaknesses, but challenges. We're all human. So I think it's very important for a kid to see that their folks have their own challenges, and that they're willing to talk about them and not shove them under the rug. And I think that once all of us learn to share, especially kids, it really helps to push the stigma around mental health issues aside and to normalize mental health conditions. And I have found that when we talk about these issues, we build these SEAL teams or communities of support and realize that we're all human. I mean, people don't want to hear you bragging about your great accomplishments in the world. They want to hear you talking about the true issues that affect you. And so I think that the more we can model authenticity for our children and talk about our own weaknesses or challenges that we're having, it really will help our kids rather than urging them to succeed and be strong all the time. I don't know if that was responsive, but those were the ideas that were triggered by me when I heard Helena and Brian and Brad just talking about this. And let's be kind to ourselves and to our kids. They're doing just fine. They're doing just fine. You guys, you kids out there, you're doing a good job.
Everyone's doing a good job. We just have to love ourselves more. That's what this pandemic is teaching us.
I
Yes.
I want to just amplify something that Cameron just said. Right?
Yes.
We're talking about all of this in the family context, and children take on different context for all of us, right? In a way, we become parents to other people as well, and we become children to other people as well. But on a corporate side of things, we have a responsibility also to put kind of ethics first around our workplace. If we're going to build sustainability, we need to be able to provide the right tools and the right environment for people that are vulnerable, right, to have relapses, right? Now, coders that lock themselves away for 72 or 96 hours to kind of write the next algo, right, they're somewhat detached, right? But at the same time, we're not trying to change people. That is one thing. They have to be able to change and evolve on their own. So us as leaders, in a way, we have to be able to kind of build that into our workplace. We end up creating more sustainability, more productivity, and really more satisfaction, in a workplace environment that is fragmented, existing under the current situation.
Brilliant. So I'm going to ask Brad we've got about 20 minutes left, the importance of nature in terms of mental health. Like, do you take your kids out into nature? Is this something that you feel is a way to help you with your illnesses?
Well, I, in some ways, I don't think of my illnesses as necessarily handicap in a sense. I find that in some ways they can be a strength. Like, all you beautiful, normal, empathetic people are really affected by isolation and stuff, but I'm right at home. And so in a lot of ways, there's being diverse, it sort of gives you an asymmetry, it gives you like another angle. And it was really interesting what Brian just said, because what he really in some ways just translated the physics of leadership a little bit differently. That leadership, the second law is leadership transacts in the minds of the people that we want to lead. And that was what he was saying about coder locks himself in a room. He doesn't think in all that the same way that we do. And we can't try and cram everybody into the same mold. They have different interests. And just like Cam said, he just translated what we were talking about or at least what I was trying to communicate when he said, worry about throwing the ball and being present. You don't need to worry necessarily about winning the game or being the Little League champ or what have you. And just like my son, the preparation is the important thing, not the grade. And in a lot of ways, and Helena, the gold that she just dropped was, in my opinion, was the piece about choice. And so I asked my children, hey, do you want to go play basketball or do you want to go on an adventure and go for a walk? We do that from time to time. And in some ways, I have this podcast episode called The Illusion of Choice. And so in discipline, the same way, my mantra, I got this from when I was a prosecutor, because everybody who prosecutes kind of says, oh, this happened to me and that happened to me. And when you sentence somebody, they're talking about all the things that happened to them, not that they're going to jail because of what they stole or who they hurt or whatever. So our whole thing is choices. Like you make good choices and there's bad choices. You make good choices, good things happen. You make bad choices, bad things happen. And that way you can come down really hard on bad choices without coming down really hard on your kids. And, we never say stuff like you're a bad boy or you're a bad girl. It's always you made a bad choice. And so in some ways, like when you get punted, and I always tell my children, it's like, hey, you have two choices. Just like Helena said, you can either do the right thing or you can get punished and then you'll do the right thing. So we can do it the easy way or the hard way. And so whenever they make a bad choice, they'll be like, is that a good choice or bad choice? First thing I say, they'll be like, bad choice. I was like, why is it a bad choice? And they'll tell me why. And so in a lot of ways, they kind of are already on the road to redemption, right? Because the implication is they can make a better choice later. But to answer your question, I sort of digress because I just got excited about what everybody else said. Nature, I think, is grounding. I'm a man of faith, and so when I think of nature, and I do a lot of astrophysics and stuff in my podcast, and nature I really see as creation, right? And so I see no delineation between spiritual matters and nature and outside, because it's all creation. Understanding creation, in my opinion, is knowing the hand of God. And so, or whatever it is you believe in. But and actually quantum field theory is the idea that we're made up of the intersection of all these energy fields and particle fields and matter fields and stuff. And so in many ways, we are universe. We're part of the universe. It's not us separate from the universe. We are part of the universe. Because when you think of like a traffic jam, right? You're driving in traffic and you feel like everybody's holding you up. But to the rest of the universe, you are the jam. And so we are part of the universe. We are, because to me, when I'm driving, if you're on the road with me, I kind of see you as part of the traffic jam, not me, right? And so, and everybody else sees me as part of the jam, not them. But really, in that sort of context, we are part of the universe. We're not separate from the universe. And so getting close to nature is just sort of, you're kind of, in some ways, you're just experiencing the universe in a different way. The universe experiences itself. And so I think taking your kids on a walk, or playing some kind of sports with them, any kind of activity will give them a new experience. And I think there's always value in that.
Thank you. So Helena, you and I talked yesterday about different types of therapies, about different types of healing when it comes to trauma and PTSD and things like that. Do you have certain techniques that you might want to share with our audience that have been working for some of your clients during COVID?
Sure, but let me just reflect a little bit on what Brad just mentioned as far as the nature piece. One of the most important things that I always recommend to people to start with is grounding. And so, like Brian mentioned, we are an electrical system first and then chemical. And if you go outside without your shoes on, that's all it takes. You can discharge electricity, that energy from your body. You can connect with the universe, like Brad mentioned. And we're meant to do that. And that is one of the things that, like, rubber-soled shoes and stuff has kind of removed us from our connection with the earth. And that is the number one best thing you can do for your sleep and your nervous system that I found, especially when you're going through all of these things where you're storing all of this energy in your body, is just to go out. I do it several times a day. Whenever I feel stressed in between meetings, I'll go out for 10 minutes, take my shoes off, and just connect with the earth. It sounds silly and kind of off the wall. There's a documentary about it free on YouTube if you're interested. It's called The Earthing Movie, but it is a very, very powerful, very effective way to bring yourself into a grounded state. As far as, sorry, was someone going to say something?
No, keep going. We're listening.
As far as modalities for therapy, I mean, I'm a firm believer there's no one-size-fits-all solution. There's no one way home. I mean, you try things. I highly recommend trying, I have a resource about how to find a good therapist, but there's a lot of different tools. EMDR is called eye movement desensitization reprogramming, very effective for moving trauma out of your body, healing from it. EFT, emotional freedom techniques, is tapping, another way to move energy. That's something I do with my clients. There's let's see, somatic experiencing is a great modality, a way of, and they're also focusing, a way of connecting with the trauma that's stored in your body or the energies that are stored in your body, and really allowing those to process through. There's just so many wonderful ways. Like Cameron mentioned CBT. There's also DBT, which is very effective for folks who are dealing with disordered eating patterns. I mean, there's contact me, reach out to me on sisujourney.com. I'd be happy to either share with you the difference between therapy, consulting, and coaching, and like help you figure out which way is the best path for you. Therapy is a tricky one because unfortunately there's a lot of people who are doing therapy that may or may not be super knowledgeable about nervous system. Polyvagal theory is something that I always look for the context of dealing with the nervous system through. So yeah, there's no one size fits all, unfortunately and fortunately. It's just kind of finding the journey that works for you and getting on it, really.
Good words. So we are now about 10 minutes from the closing of our session. And I would like to use this time to give advice to fathers out there who may be struggling with mental health and just this whole situation. I mean, COVID has not been kind to many people. It's taken lives, it's taken jobs, it's taken dreams away. Let's put it simply. And there's a lot of people out there who don't know how to come out of this spiral that they've been in. And we all know it could just take seconds for any one of us to have, experienced this kind of situation, this kind of despair. So what advice would you give to people out there who are really trying to cope out there? And we don't really talk about this. Everyone's trying to move on. Everyone's trying to do the best that they can. But there's a lot of people that have tried, have no way out. I would like to focus on this for the next 10 minutes.
I'm just going to briefly talk from some experience that, we all go through different stages of depression for different things. Sometimes it's just topical. Sometimes we all have to learn how to be able to manage that. When we are feeling good about ourselves is the time to kind of reflect and work on those things that put us in those spots that we become vulnerable at. There should not be a stigma attached to reaching out and asking for help, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's on a personal level, or even if it's an anonymous to somebody that you appear that you can, that you feel that you can express yourself to. So I think it's very important that when we engage with people that we know may have some sort of issue going on, we may not know what it is. It's not up to us to pass judgment on them, right? But to show support and at the same time have empathy towards the fact that somebody nearby is going through a challenge that, even saying, a little prayer for them might help, in terms of kind of energy and pushing that, positivity towards that person.
Beautiful. Brad, I'm going to let you go next. How do we help? What can we do?
Yeah. So I think that when you, like in terms of just being a good parent, I think if you go back to the physics of leadership, that everybody wants to do the best for themselves that they can. Leadership transacts in the minds of the people that we want to lead, and how we make them feel about themselves is going to determine what kind of path we put them on and how responsive they are to us. And in some ways, I call my podcast Sonic Gravity, because when somebody is listening to you, I think of it as they're orbiting in my gravity. They're orbiting in my sonic gravity. And when somebody is listening to you, when they care about what you say, you have the ability to change them and affect them. You're going to affect them either way. The question is, are you going to affect them in a good way, or are you going to affect them in a bad way? And, we know that the third law is that how we make people feel about themselves is how we're going to be able to change them or affect them or impact them. And we know this is true because if somebody tells us something and they don't make us feel anything, we'll forget their name instantly, all that kind of stuff. But people, if you make somebody feel a certain way, they'll remember feelings forever. And sometimes the feelings can be so strong that they will become part of their identity. And so I think that is really, really important. And if somebody is having trouble with like a death in the family or something like that, I just invite you to check out my podcast, because I have an episode called Leadership and Loss, Love, Death, and Astrophysics, and talks about how, in a lot of ways, talks about how gold is made in the stars. And in a lot of ways, like when your parents or when somebody you loved was alive, they're like a star, right? And then they go out and, and then you realize that when like your ancestors, the only reason they ever existed was for you. And when you realize that you're the star that's shining now and your children are in your orbit, you are passing essentially the gold that you have to them. And so when you pass, like, you want to make your ancestors proud of what you did with the gold that they left behind. And you want your children not to be sort of crippled with grief and all that kind of stuff, but to, know that, and I will want to know, I'll know that when I go, the only reason I ever existed was for them. And I'll hope that I was worthy of them and lived a life well lived. And, that's, I think, if you think of it that way, like if you experience the death, it kind of gives you a sense of purpose for today. And then it makes kind of death seem not so bad, right? Because it's just kind of part of the universe, which I think was kind of going back to what Helena was saying about walking around barefoot. So anyway, that's my whole thing, is just leaving people better than you found them. And just remember that people want to do the best for themselves as they can. They're going to process whatever you say and do. Your sonic gravity is going to process uniquely in their brains according to their filters and their culture and their fatigue and hunger, things like that. And how you make people feel about themselves is going to determine what kind of path you put them on. Thanks for
Absolutely.
listening.
Thank you for your words of wisdom. That was beautiful and so heartfelt. So thank you for that. I'm going to let Helena, you say we've got 6 minutes left. So if you could say 2 minutes, and then I'm going to give the closing to Cameron.
Absolutely. I'm just going to leave one resource and one just kind of recommendation. So resource, self-compassion, just really starting with self-compassion. There is an Kristen Neff. She has beautiful books. She has a book called Self-Compassion. There's a course called Mindful Self-Compassion she does with another person. I mean, really starting to, if you're going through this period, this mental health challenge, like Anu mentioned, really start appreciating what you have been through in the last year, how freaking hard you've been working, and start focusing on being very compassionate for yourself. And then, like everyone's mentioned, Brian, Cameron, Brad, and myself through the connection piece, get support, reach out. There's no shame in this stuff. We all have it. We've all been through this stuff. We've all been through ups and downs. You may be just on the verge of a breakthrough, but right now it looks very, very dark. Tell your story, get support, rally the troops around you, figure out who's safe to share with and share only with those people. And yeah, I mean, that's really the answer. It's simple, but not easy, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Helena. Cameron, closing words of wisdom.
Well, first of all, I've heard so many words of wisdom just on this panel. I want to thank all of you guys. This has been part of my self-care, just to be with all of you. It's such an honor. I'll give you just very quickly the takeaways that I try to run through at the end of my talks or when I'm mentoring folks. And I will give you a resource. My website is www.stout, that's my last name, STOUT, like beer, which is strange since I'm an alcoholic, stoutheart, one word, .org. So there's a blog there called Light at Sea. It's one of the tabs. And I go through a lot of the self-care regimens that I use. In terms of takeaways, first of all, mental health is not binary. You're not normal or mentally ill. It's a spectrum like anything. And so I think it's important to recognize that. Brad and I have talked about, our own lived experiences with mental health issues. I see that as a blessing, something to share with other folks. These really are not your fault. These are illnesses. They're called mental health conditions because they are health conditions. There are genetic components to these. I went through very deep depression. I'm an alcoholic. My dad was, and he took his own life in 2008. And
Wow.
my getting through that has been part of my resilience. And I miss my dad, but he was an example to me. There is so much hope for ongoing recovery from these issues. And I think Helena said this very nicely. Don't take the darkness of today, because you may be feeling dark. I know I have, I still do sometimes, but don't impose that on the future as if you're always going to feel like that. There's tremendous hope. And if you engage, if you go push through the shame, push through the stigma to get help, there's so much good help out there in any number of modalities. So go get help. No shame in that. I see a therapist. I take medication that really helps. If it's working, if you are on meds, keep taking them. They're there to help you. And the last thing is on self-care. You don't have to do that much. A lot of people, one of my blog posts is called Exercise Shouldn't Be the E Word. And when I'm mentoring folks and they're feeling bad, one of the first questions I have is, what do you do for exercise? And the response almost always is, oh, God, you're right. It's guilt. I'm not doing enough. You don't have to do that much. Meditate for 5 minutes. Do what you can in a very organized and yet very gentle way every day, something that will get you through to the next day. And I wish that everyone can go forward with a lighter heart and a more focused mind, because there's tremendous hope out there. And we've been through a very hard time, and we're getting through it, and we're going to come out the other side of that. So I have tremendous hope for the folks in our country, for humanity. And when in doubt, share. Thanks.
Thank you. And that is such a great way to end this. I was thinking, at the beginning of the pandemic, when people said this is the beginning of a pandemic, you have a whole planet filled with fear. And now we're talking about hope. That's when you know that we're on our way out of this pandemic, is when people start to see love, and people start to see hope, and people start to see happiness and the beauty and what isn't there, or what they couldn't see before, these past 18 months. So all of you have been incredibly insightful and wise and shared so many nuggets for everyone listening. We've recorded this message. It's going into a digital library. It's going to be shared after for those people that weren't able to attend. Someday it will be turned into audio content that we're going to share on our new podcast apps on Sheconomy. And this app is now on $20 mobile phones. That's going out to the bottom billion who are living on $2 a day. So all of these words, your messages, your wisdom, I really hope it gets to the people that need it the most. So thank you for joining us, for those people that have been listening today. And I hope you join us for some more sessions. We have another half of our day with amazing content in the next 2 days. So thank you all. And
Anu, big shout out to you. You did a fantastic job moderating. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to all of
Yeah,
you.
thanks, Anu.
Thank you, everyone. See you again soon.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See ya.